The contract sat on Tom Brady's kitchen table, untouched for 3 weeks. 7 figures, A-list director, full creative control. Everything a superstar athlete could want for their biographical film. Yet the 7-time Super Bowl champion couldn't bring himself to sign it. The reason would shake the sports world to its core and reveal a side of America's golden boy that no one saw coming. It was a rainy Tuesday morning in Tampa when the call came. Tom was alone in his mansion, still adjusting to life after football, when his agent's excited voice crackled through the phone. "Tom, they want to tell your story. The comeback, the championships, the legacy. This could be bigger than The Blind Side." But as Tom stared at the contract, all he could think about was the story they'd never tell. The one buried so deep that even his closest friends didn't know the truth. The story of why he really retired, and the promise he made to a dying boy in a hospital room that changed everything. It started 3 years earlier, during what should have been another routine hospital visit. Tom had done hundreds of them, signing jerseys, taking photos, bringing smiles to sick kids. But something about 8-year-old Marcus Williams was different. The boy didn't ask for an autograph or a selfie. Instead, he looked up at Tom with wise eyes that seemed too old for his small face and asked, "Do you ever get scared?" The question caught Tom off guard. Here was this kid, fighting leukemia with more courage than most adults could muster, asking if the great Tom Brady ever felt fear. The honest answer tumbled out before Tom could stop it. "Every single day, buddy. Every single day." Marcus smiled. Not the starstruck grin Tom was used to, but something deeper, more knowing. "My mom says being scared just means you care about something." "What do you care about, Mr. Brady?" Tom found himself sitting on the edge of the hospital bed, talking to this remarkable boy for over an hour. Marcus didn't want to discuss football or championships. He wanted to know about Tom's childhood, his dreams, his fears about the future. For the first time in years, Tom felt like someone was seeing him as more than just a quarterback. As the visit ended, Marcus grabbed Tom's hand with surprising strength. "Promise me something," the boy whispered. "When your playing days are over, don't let them make a movie about you unless they tell the real story. Not just the wins and losses, but the stuff that really matters." Tom promised, thinking it was the innocent request of a sick child. He had no idea that Marcus would be gone within 6 months, or that this promise would haunt him for years to come. The funeral was small, private. Tom sat in the back row of St. Mary's Chapel, watching Marcus's parents say goodbye to their son. The boy's mother, Sarah Williams, spotted Tom after the service. Instead of thanking him for coming, she handed him a worn notebook. "Marcus wrote in this every day," she said, tears streaming down her face. "After you visited, he wrote about your conversation for weeks. He said you were the first adult who talked to him like his thoughts mattered, not just his illness." That night, Tom opened the notebook with trembling hands. Page after page revealed the profound thoughts of a dying child. But one entry, dated just a week before Marcus passed away, stopped Tom cold. "Mr. Brady promised he won't let them make a fake movie about him. I hope he keeps his promise. Most grown-ups forget what they tell kids, but I think he's different. I think he understands that the real story isn't about being perfect. It's about being human." Now, 3 years later, that notebook sat next to the movie contract on Tom's kitchen table. The studio executives had pitched him their vision. A triumphant tale of determination, victory against all odds, the perfect American success story. They wanted to gloss over his struggles, his doubts, the times he considered quitting. They wanted the mythology, not the man. Tom's publicist had been calling non-stop. "This is career suicide, Tom. Do you know how many athletes would kill for this opportunity?" But every time Tom considered signing, he heard Marcus's voice. "Promise me they'll tell the real story." The real story wasn't just about football. It was about a kid from California who felt like he was never good enough, who spent decades trying to prove his worth to a father who rarely showed emotion. It was about the panic attacks in the early years of his career, the times he threw up before big games, not from nerves but from the crushing weight of expectations. It was about the loneliness of being on top, the way success had isolated him from genuine human connection until a dying boy taught him what really mattered. The real story was about learning to be vulnerable, to admit weakness, to understand that his greatest victory wasn't any championship, but the moment he stopped pretending to be perfect. Tom was still wrestling with the decision when his phone rang. It was Sarah Williams, Marcus's mother. They'd stayed in touch over the years, exchanging cards on holidays, brief updates on their lives. But something in her voice told him this wasn't a casual call. "Tom, I need to tell you something about Marcus," she began, her voice shaking. "Something I should have told you years ago." The words that followed hit Tom like a physical blow. Marcus hadn't just been another sick kid. He'd been a huge Patriots fan, had watched every game despite his treatments. But more than that, he'd been bullied at school for being weak, for being different. Football was his escape, and Tom Brady was his hero. Not because of the championships, but because Marcus saw in Tom someone who'd overcome being overlooked, being doubted. "He used to tell me that if Tom Brady could prove everyone wrong, maybe he could too," Sarah continued through her tears. "That hospital visit meant everything to him, but not for the reasons you think. You were the first person who made him feel like his voice mattered, like he had something important to say even though he was just a sick kid." The conversation that followed revealed the full truth. Marcus had been writing stories, trying to become an author despite his illness. His notebook wasn't just a diary. It was filled with stories about heroes who weren't perfect, who struggled and doubted and found their strength in vulnerability. He wanted to be a writer who told real stories about real people, Sarah whispered. Stories that showed heroes as human beings, not myths. "That's why your promise meant so much to him. He saw in you someone who might actually keep that promise." Tom hung up the phone and sat in silence for hours. Outside, Tampa's evening light was fading, painting his empty mansion in shadows. For years, he'd carried Marcus's promise like a burden. Now he understood it was actually a gift. The chance to honor a boy who'd seen through all the fame and success to the person underneath. The next morning, Tom called his agent. "I'm not signing the contract." "Tom, be reasonable, Dash." "I'm not finished," Tom interrupted. "I want you to set up a meeting with the studio heads. I'll do the movie, but only on my terms." The meeting was tense. Studio executives don't like to be told how to make movies, especially by athletes. But Tom came prepared. He brought Marcus's notebook, read passages aloud, explained his vision for a different kind of sports movie. "You want to make a movie about failure?" One executive scoffed. "About weakness and doubt? That's not what audiences want from Tom Brady." Tom leaned forward, his voice steady but firm. "That's exactly what they need. You want to know why I really retired? It wasn't because my body gave out, or because I lost my competitive edge. I retired because a dying 8-year-old taught me that being perfect isn't the same as being great. And I promised him I'd tell that story." For months, the negotiations continued. The studio wanted their sanitized version of Tom's life. Tom insisted on something deeper, more honest. The breakthrough came when he agreed to finance part of the movie himself and brought in an independent director known for intimate character studies rather than big-budget spectacles. The movie that eventually got made wasn't the one Hollywood had envisioned. Instead of focusing solely on victories, it explored the cost of success. Instead of portraying Tom as naturally gifted, it showed years of doubt and insecurity. Instead of ending with a championship celebration, it concluded with Tom visiting Marcus in the hospital, both of them learning what true strength really means. But perhaps most importantly, the movie included Marcus's story, not as a sidebar or feel-good moment, but as the emotional core of the narrative. The boy who'd been overlooked by everyone except the doctors treating him became the teacher who helped America's most successful quarterback understand what really mattered. When the movie premiered, the reception was unlike anything Tom had expected. Yes, there were some who criticized it for being too soft, for not focusing enough on his athletic achievements. But the response from young people, from parents of sick children, from anyone who'd ever felt overlooked or unimportant, was overwhelming. Letters poured in from kids who said the movie helped them understand that heroes aren't perfect, that struggle doesn't make you weak. Parents shared stories of children who'd been inspired by Marcus's character to pursue their own dreams despite obstacles. Sarah Williams attended the premiere, tears streaming down her face as she watched her son's words brought to life on screen. After the showing, she found Tom in the lobby, surrounded by well-wishers. "Marcus would have loved this," she said simply. "You kept your promise." Months later, Tom received a package with no return address. Inside was a handwritten letter from a teenage girl in Ohio. "Dear Mr. Brady, I watched your movie with my mom last night. I have cystic fibrosis, and sometimes I feel like giving up. But Marcus's story showed me that even if your life is short, you can still make it count. I'm starting to write stories now, just like he did. Thank you for keeping your promise to him. It means more than you'll ever know." Reading that letter, Tom finally understood what Marcus had tried to teach him 3 years earlier in that hospital room. True greatness isn't measured in championships or accolades. It's measured in the lives you touch, the promises you keep, the courage to show your humanity when the world expects perfection. The movie studio had wanted to create another mythological sports hero. Instead, Tom Brady chose to reveal the man behind the myth. In doing so, he discovered that his greatest victory wasn't won on any football field, but in a promise kept to a dying boy who saw greatness not in perfection, but in truth. Today, Tom Brady's movie stands as something unique in the world of sports films. It doesn't shy away from doubt, struggle, or imperfection. Instead, it celebrates these very human qualities as the foundation of true strength. The Marcus Williams Foundation, established with proceeds from the film, helps young writers from underprivileged backgrounds tell their own stories. But perhaps the most important legacy is the example it set. Other athletes began demanding more honest portrayals in their biographical films. Studios slowly began to understand that audiences craved authenticity over mythology. The perfect hero narrative that had dominated sports movies for decades finally began to evolve. Tom Brady could have signed that original contract and added millions to his already substantial fortune. Instead, he chose to honor the memory of a boy who taught him that the most important victories happen not on the field, but in the quiet moments when we choose truth over convenience, vulnerability over strength, and human connection over individual glory. Sometimes the most powerful choice an athlete can make isn't about competing or winning. Sometimes it's about keeping a promise to a child who saw greatness not in perfection, but in the courage to be real. And in the end, that may be Tom Brady's greatest touchdown of all.